Hi guys, I'm back with another episode of my interview series. Today I have with me Ananda Lima. She is the author of Motherland, forthcoming in October 2021, Black Lawrence Press, winner of the Hudson Prize, and the chapbooks Amblo. Am, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's
Amblyopia.
okay, Amblyopia. Okay, Amblyopia. Okay, Bull City Press 2020 translation. Winner of the Vela Prize, Vigil Get Fresh box forthcoming in 2022, and Tropicalia, Newfound 2021 winner of the Newfound Prose Prize. Her work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, Poets.org, Kenyan Review Online, Gulf Coast, The Common, Poet Lore, Poetry Northwest, and elsewhere. She has an MA in linguistics from UCLA and an MFA in creative writing and fiction from Rutgers University, uh, New York. So let's welcome Ananda. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great. And so nice to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. So first of all, I want to congratulate you. I mean, I'm just looking at your publication, and it's like your work is published in magazines that are dream of many poets. So really, congratulations for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's great to be there. Yeah.
Really happy that you get to showcase your work in such amazing journals. So okay, so I want to start from the beginning. So tell me, how has your journey been as a writer?
Yeah, I love that question. Okay, so tying in with journals, I think I've had a lot of things come out in the last 2 years, let's say, but I've been writing them for a long time. It takes a while to get them out there. But I've always written in some form or another. I think when I was a kid, I would used to write like poems. um, but I sort of as an adult, I mostly wrote fiction. And I wrote without people knowing that I wrote for a long time. Um, but I started getting sort of verses, like sentences, like lines. And I would write a story to have that line, and the story was really crappy, and the line was good. And then I finally understood, no, I'm a poet. So I came back through fiction to get back to poetry. I've been writing for a while. I wrote throughout my kid when he was baby. That was a very good poetry, was a very good format because you can um, it's a little bit more condensed. You can write, you can make a lot of progress in a little time, in the small windows of time. um, so I've been writing for a while, and then this book that is coming out now in October, Motherland. It's been a long time coming, progression through my son sort of growing. So that is poetry, and other things came out the past couple of years, but I've been writing them for a long time. Journal wise, I've been sending them out for a while, but the very first publication of poetry that I had was the American Poetry Review, which was very encouraging, because I was sending it lots of places, because I was just like, oh, let's see how it is to send things out. And I got so many rejections. I was like, oh, okay. But then they accepted the poem. So that was a very encouraging scenario. So now when I get rejected, from that experience, I was like, oh, it really depends on who's reading. So it doesn't mean that something's good or bad. It just depends on who's reading as well. Um, yeah, so slow accretion of writing and getting things out there over the years.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
really
hope I answered.
no, it was a very perfect answer. In fact, I'm so impressed that your first publication was the American Poetry Review. Like, wow! I mean, what more could you want? Like, wow!
That was it was a little bit random. I wasn't expect, and I was just sending. I didn't hear or anything. I just sent it to various places that I liked. But it was good because I think even the rejections that I got together with the acceptance, put me in a good attitude. When I got rejections in the future, I was chiller about it. So I think it was a very good first experience.
I'm really happy that you got that. So I want to ask you that what kept you moving, like when you wrote your first poem, and then to the point where your poem got published in one of the highly esteemed magazines. So what really encouraged you? What was your journey like after that, after your first poem to this publication? And when did you feel for the first time that now this is the right time to send your work to journals? Was it an impulsive decision, or you wanted to test the quality, or the content of your work? What was that?
Right. Yeah. So I think I love your questions. So I think to send out that first batch, which I sent to many, many places. I had been writing for a while, and I had a very lovely group. We are still very good friends. I just moved to Chicago. That's why I'm not in that group anymore. But a very lovely group of writers who were also mothers. And there was a mixture of sort of more professional people and people who just did it for their own interest. And they were very encouraging. So I started writing, and I slowly sort of started sharing the poems. And I think that encouragement really helped me go and say, hey, let me try this out, and send it out. So I think having supportive friends, I think it may be, depending on your personality, even more important than having friends who are very professional and know all the good edits or whatever. I think that was very good to send it out. And the other thing is, I had this sense of wanting to participate. I loved reading those journals, and I loved reading and listening to poems, but I got this urge to be sort of a part of the community. So the first time I sent things out, it was just really like a fun, let me send this out and see what happens. And it was very sort of, oh, I'll send it to this place, this place, this place. It wasn't very, I don't know, strategized or whatever. But it was good. Um, and I think one thing that I kind of learned from that experience, and I think something that it's part my personality, but just part something that I realized, is just to be very relaxed about rejection. Don't take it personally. Don't let it get to you. I think if you submit a lot, that helps you sort of not worry about it. So I started seeing submissions in a very positive light. So it was something that, it was kind of a motivation for me. Oh, now I feel like this is done. Let me submit it. It was kind of like a reward for myself to send it out. So I think that really helps if you can work within yourself to make the submission process a positive thing. I think that will help both in the writing and the submission. Now, what kept me writing all these years, because it took a long time to place my manuscript, which I think it was good in the end, because it was really ready. When I started sending out, I think it wasn't super ready. But I think in terms of the writing, what kept me going is sort of find joy again in the writing itself. There's so many things going on always, right? But right now there's just so much to process, and I think to sort of find the joy on just the writing, separate from submission and who's going to read it, etc. I think that's something that really helps me keep going now, and it really helped me through those years that it was just uh, a publication here and there, but it was basically just me and my friends reading those poems. So find the joy in this writing and sharing just with a couple of readers. That really kept me going.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so now I want to ask you about your process of writing. Like when you are writing, so
Mhm.
what really inspires you? Like you read, obviously you have been reading poems of other writers, so that's like an ongoing thing for a writer. But when you are it is something that when you have this proper desk or something where you are like, no, I am going to write something now, or it is something like that. You walk along the park, you see things, you observe people, and then you are like, wow, that is something I really want to approach, or this is a subject that I want to talk about. So how do you approach it? Like, how do you approach the process of writing itself?
That's great. So for me, it's all very chaotic. I do not like sit at the desk at certain time of the day or whatever to write. I think I really admire people who work like that, and I think that's really lovely. I don't have the the time to and the organization skills. I'm not a very organized person to sort of make it so regular. Over the years, I discovered that both I don't have the time and I also work best with sort of chaos, you know. So so I I think about it as my son is in the playground or playing with his friends, or when I'm, back when I was catching more public transportation, like in New York, you're holding on the thing, you can't even write anything. But I'm sort of thinking about it all throughout. Um, I write isolated lines, on the phone. So it's very sort of, you know, chaotic. And I do, when I collected a lot of thoughts and a lot of notes, that is when I go, okay, I need like a day or like a block of time. And I usually find it randomly, either on a weekend or a late night, kids running. And that's when I put it together. But it's very not very organized and very sort of just grabbing things and putting them together as I can. And I think that works for me. I don't think that would work for everybody. But for me, it both in a practical sense, that means I can find time, but also I think it brings a lot of energy, and it helps me put things together that if I sat on the desk, I probably wouldn't have done it so well. It's smashing these things together. So I think for me, it works in a practical sense and also in a creative sense to have a more flexible approach that is kind of all over the place. I don't necessarily write every day or every week or anything like that. It's like stretches. There will be stretches that I'm writing a lot, and there will be stretches that I'm thinking. Um, and that works. It took me a long time to feel less anxious about that type of process. Before, during the sort of dry spells, there were dry spells either because I wasn't coming up with anything or because I didn't have time. I would be very anxious, like, will I write again? Oh my gosh, I can't write anymore, you know. But now I've done it. I've done the chaotic cycles enough that I know, oh, it's okay, it's coming, So I think the big difference for me now is just that I'm relaxed and less anxious about not writing or writing very little for a while. So very chaotic, basically. That's my process. Reading, always reading, that always helps. And I think also even reading things that are not at all related to anything I'm writing, anything that like sort of I enjoy and I appreciate, helps to spark things. So when I'm reading, that really helps. Another thing that is really generates a lot for me is if I'm listening to like an audiobook and you have to pick ones that work, if it's very dense, it doesn't work. And walking, that really gets things going for me. Sometimes I have to stop, pause, and make notes. And they're not, the notes I'm making are not usually super related to what I'm listening to in terms of subject matter or technique or anything. It's just that it gets the brain going when I'm listening to something I like and moving my body. That to me is very genuine. Mm-hmm.
So now that we have talked about the process of writing, I want to talk to you about the process of editing or proofreading. So as a writer, how difficult it is for you to cut short your own your favorite lines or something, because as a writer there would be some words, some metaphors or something like that that would be very dear to you, and it would be it might be a difficult for you to just edit those, or you would fight with yourself to keep those things within the work. So how do you battle with that?
I love those questions. It's like so obvious that you're right, because you understand with your questions. Um, so I write fiction and poetry, and I think that's different for me. Editing is different fiction and poetry. I find poetry much easier for me to like let go. Even if I like the line, I'm like, okay, that doesn't belong. I'm much more relaxed and less anxious about like crossing it out, or because for poetry for me it's like no, 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 this is the poem, and if I really love this, it's gonna come out later. I just keep it and it's gonna come out later, so over time it became much easier for me to do that. um with poetry, when I'm writing a poem, even the early drafts, but that's how I continue from the beginning to the end. I just open a document, I write the thing, and I copy the whole thing on top and change that. Before I make more changes, I copy. So I I copy every change. I keep a gigantic document with like I don't know however many pages, uh, without the changes. That frees me because I don't feel attached. I'm like I can always just go back. It's right here, so I can cut this, and if I really miss it, I can go back. That really helps me. Rarely do I go back. It's almost never. But having that really helps me cut, So I'm like, cut, 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 cut. It's fine. If I want it back, I just, it's right there. Um, so that really works for me with poems. Um, with fiction, it's tough. I can't do that with fiction. I do save lots of versions of fiction, um, but it's tougher to let go in fiction, and mainly because the structure of fiction. So I get myself into sort of plot tangles, and I'm like, I don't like this thing, but if I take it out, the whole thing is gonna have to change. So fiction editing, it takes a much longer time. I have to wrestle. I have to convince myself, no, that has to go. I have to think of some other solution for it. So because because poetry does have structure, but the structure is much more open to leaps and things which I actually like. When you cut something and the leap is bigger, sometimes I'm like, yes, that's even better. Uh, Fiction has a little less tolerance for that kind of shenanigans. So so I think it's much easier for me to edit poetry, and I found ways to make myself comfortable with letting things go in poetry. The same is true in fiction, but it's harder work. I'm wrestling with myself much more. And I enjoy the editing process more in poetry, um, because, again, there's more space for leaps and drastic turns and things like that in poetry. Uh, but yes, it does. I think for me, it took finding a way to feel comfortable cutting a line, even if you like it. And for me, that way is to know that it's there if I want it later, either in this poem or in another.
Okay, okay. So I'm really glad that the process is easier for you, because for some writers it's like a constant struggle. So yeah, it's a good thing that you can easily do that. So now I want to ask you that, since you have so many publications and published books, so have your process of approaching poetry has changed in any way? How do you see it now? Your relationship with poetry, has it evolved over the period of time? Has it changed, or is it like a friend to you that you talk to in your spare time? Is it like a teacher that teaches you when you are approaching it? Is it a is it something, is it is a voice within yourself that says that I want you to I want you to explore me, or I want you to help me figure something out? So what is your relationship with poetry is like now?
Oh my gosh, I love the question. This is great. Um, so I think now, um, there's two things. One, overall, I'm a little bit more. I think that comes up a lot. That's coming up a lot. I'm a little bit more comfortable with myself, and I know myself a little bit more as a poet to sort of be relaxed with the long cycles of it and not be worried all the time. Which I think is very important for me because I'm not a person who does well with like fear and anxiety. I have to sort of manage myself that way. But I think poetry now, I love the metaphors you came up with, and I think a lot of those apply. But I think it's more of an extension of myself and of my life. I think it's more integrated. Um, and I see more now writing as living, and it's sort of a part of life like other parts of life, that I think are going to evolve and keep moving forward and age, but I feel like it's a little bit more just a part of living and an extension of myself. And it's like knowing people and loving and waking up. It's one of the things that is sort of just an integral part of my life, and now I sort of trust that it's going to be there the whole time in some way or another.
Okay, so as you are a linguist as well, so you know all the I'm not a linguist, but as much as I can understand, so it's really related to all the sounds and all the academic stuff. So now that you have that academic background, but you are a writer, which means that you are a very sensitive and emotional person. So now there are two sides that one is like you have to take care of certain parameters for poetry, and then the other side is like, no, I want to talk about my emotions. So how do you keep the balance between the two? Like how do you do you silence the academic side, like I don't want to listen to you, let me just focus on my emotions first, I want to vent it out? Or do you focus on the academic side and then you are like, no, I don't want to give away to emotions, I want to I'm a linguist, so I want to focus more on the craft rather than the emotional side, the artistic side? So how does that battle, if it's a duel, so how does this end? I want to know,
I
I'm very
love that.
curious about that.
That's so great. So I was out and officially more like first in the linguistics world. That's how I moved to the US. Um, but now the writer is the boss, for sure. If there were any conflicts, the writer would win, and the linguist is more helpful tool. There are many things that I love that I brought from linguistics. One of them that is, I think, very big is not being intimidated by norms of the proper way or how it should be, because the type of linguistics that I did, I'm just moving because of the sun. The type of linguistics that I did is this sort of scientific inquiry of how language works. It was not prescriptive at all. It never said people should do this and the preposition should never go at the end of the sentence or whatever. So nobody I worked with on that field does not work like that. The way it works is, how do people actually speak and why is that possible and that other thing is not possible? Why are people comfortable with leaving a preposition in the end, but they don't put it like anywhere in the sentence? It's just a specific topic. So it was more like an observation and love of language and describing what happens versus people should do this and they should do that. So I brought that comfort with me, which I think is very lovely. So I don't so much worry about like the proper ways of doing things. I'm like, is this a way that people use? The other thing is also not being afraid of I don't know, grammar or syntax. I'm not afraid of these things. I did very deep sort of syntactic analysis as a linguist. and I sort of see terminology and rules as just sort of a shorthand to describe something. And I think these really help me as a writer. It's both a love of structure and how language works in the syntax, but also not being intimidated by the sort of prescriptive side of it. I think these are very good gifts. Um, the other thing is that as a linguist, I think that's true of any linguist that I met in when I was in that life. It's just a joy and love of how language works and the possibility of it. So I brought all of that. Um, I brought some understanding about what is in common between these two sounds. Why do they go together? Um, so sounds and syntax. So I brought knowledge, and I also brought perspective, I think, of loving language as it is, and not feeling self-conscious if something is proper or not proper, and enjoying uh, the possibilities of syntax. So I think this is all very lovely. Um, so I sort of brought the good things, I think, and I don't so much um, stress about linguistics as a writer. It's more like, oh, this is a fun thing. Oh, look at that. Look at what I can do here. Um, I loved my time doing linguistics. Um, but I think what was missing is I loved it, but I wanted something else, and that's the writing. Um, so I think it worked out the way that I put them together. It worked out. Linguistics is more sort of a help and a part of my background that helps with the writing versus something that conflicts with it, if that makes sense. Mhm.
So another question that I want to ask you is, how do you see the relationship between narrative poetry and the fiction itself? If there is any
I love
relation
that.
between the two.
Yeah. So I think maybe like the narrative. I write a lot of sort of narrative poems, and people say that for a lot of them they can follow. There's a story. There's a narrative there, um, and I think maybe that's what where my fiction writing and poetry sort of uh, go together. Um, but for me, I know a lot of people who write both prose and poetry. Their poetry, they have a lot of hybrid situation going on. They may write prose poems and flash and stuff like that. For me, for whatever reason, they're very different. I don't know why that is. Maybe I get something different from fiction than poetry, but I think the only thing they have in common is that narrative impulse that comes out in some of my poems. But I think subject matter, I tend to write about different things. Um, Style, like my prose is not particularly short. I have a very hard time writing short stories. They tend to be very long, and I have to like sweat to cut them. Um, and very verbose kind of. I'm always cutting. My thing is I always write too much with fiction, and I always have to cut. So I think for me they're very separate and different in a little bit of style, and the only thing that they do have together is this sort of narrative tendencies. And I think it's in some way the fiction may help me in this way. Um, and the poetry also helps in other ways because I'm always cutting, so that helps. But I think that the type of narrative that I do in fiction and poetry is very different, and both the subject matter too. I'm not 100% sure why that is. Um, maybe the stuff that I write in poetry, I'm very much happier getting closer. My speakers can be very close to me and the things that happen in my life. In fiction, not so much. So I don't know what's going on there, and I think it's something I have to investigate. But they're very different for me, the prose and the poetry.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about your two chapbooks. So the name themselves fascinate me. So one
Mhm.
is translation, and the other one is I'm going to mispronounce it.
Emblea. Nobody knows how to say this thing. I only know because I've been talking to the doctors. It's amblyopia.
Okay, amblyopia.
Amblyopia.
So yeah, these two
Yeah.
books particularly I want to talk to you about. So first, let's talk about amblyopia. So what
Mhm.
is it about, and what is the meaning of this particular word? And then we will talk
That's
about translation.
awesome. Okay, so amblyopia, um, it's basically the condition that people call like lazy eye. It's when one eye is stronger than the other, and because of that, the one eye is weak. The brain has trouble creating a converging the two images, and often the stronger eye just suppresses the weak eye to try to create a single image. So that's amblyopia. And my son, I have amblyopia, but I never thought about it or even knew it by this name. And it's very weak in my case. My son has it very strongly, very pronounced. So what happened is he's always had glasses since he was like one or something. Um, and I've always taken him to the doctor regularly, you know. But when we moved, we found a very good doctor who went, hang on a second, it's not just purely correct you're wearing glasses, you know. There are developmental consequences to having this condition, and they have to do with spatial reasoning, um, because you use your vision to sort of figure out space, and that condition interferes with a lot of things. So that happened uh, a little bit before the pandemic, but going into the pandemic. So before and during, we are sort of understanding this. And when I went to the doctor, he's explaining all the sort of side effects um, that occur in my son. I'm listening to his description, and I'm like, wait, isn't everybody like that? Because I thought I've always had them, and I just thought that's just the way it is. And or the things that I knew everybody was not like that. I thought they were just part of my personality or something. You know, I'm always getting lost. I don't know where right and left are. You know, stuff like that. It's like no, no, no. Maybe whatever you would have been like that anyways. But having amblyopia does tend to create these effects. So it was a very mind blowing moment for me because both hearing this description of myself that I thought was just regular but associated with the condition, finding these things about myself, finding it out about my son, and then I was feeling so guilty that I had given it to him, and that he has it stronger than me. You know, so many emotions and things to process. And on top of that, the language used to describe this condition is very poetic, right? The two eyes fighting to converge into a one single thing. So many things. Um, Left and right in politics. There was just so many poetic things going on that were so in your face. So I'm thinking and feeling guilty, and I'm feeling guilty about the poet seeing all these things. It's just very mind blowing moment. Um, so and also on top of that, before amblyopia, before this happened in my life, I was writing bilingual poems where I'm trying to integrate the two languages, and the dominant language, which is English, because I live here. I mean, my dominant language, my mother tongue is Portuguese, but because I'm living here, the English is sort of takes over. So I was working a lot with these poems that are bilingual, try to converge them into a single poem. And the amblyopia condition just fit it so perfectly. So all of this is happening at the same time. So it was a lot, you know. Um, so it, I wrote that chapter sort of feverishly and quickly, and there was a lot that it really helped me put on the page. Um, it was a very sort of chapbook experience because it was perfect for a chapbook because it was very single focused, and very condensed and very intense, you know. So I wrote it while living the situation and sort of processing and try to deal with it. Um, and it came out as a chapbook uh, very quickly, relatively speaking. You know, translation was an accumulation, an experimentation to find where that nucleus was, you know, but amblyopia was very intense. So, you know, this is the thing. Um, yes. So that was amblyopia.
Okay, so I'm really sorry to hear
Hmm.
about your experience as well as your son's.
Yes.
I really hope that he gets fine, and more
Yeah,
power
yeah,
to you, more power to you and your son.
yeah, yeah. We
Uh,
found good help, so we are very happy about that. Yeah.
okay, so I want to ask you about another book of yours, which is translation. So, if you
Mm.
have anything that you would like to share from that particular book, because the title itself, it's really fascinating to me. So, I want to ask you about the title, like how did you conceive that, and secondly, any poem that that's a signature of that collection that you would like to share with us.
I love it. So, and sorry, I'm looking that way just to see if they're playing. They are. Sorry. There you go. So translation is a great contrast against amblyopia because the process was so much slower and cumulative writing that one. So the way I wrote translation is I thought I had a collection growing, and I did in a way, but it was a very broad set of poems, and I was sort of trying to find the collection. And then in the process of experimenting and putting them together and seeing how they work together, I realized, wait a minute, no, I have a chapbook in here, and this is what I should be focusing on, a smaller set um, around translation and motherhood and bilingual, but there was a core there. Um, and I sort of put the collection thinking in pause. But after a long time, and sort of started working on this chapbook. Um, and that's how translation was like, oh yes, this works together. This is a thing, and it's smaller than a collection. So it took a long time and a lot of experimentation and a lot of not knowing what I was working with, which is totally different from amblyopia. Um, so so that was that one. And having when I finished translation, that is when the collection, working on the collection, really started working for me because that gave me an anchor, something to hover around and to sort of, orient myself in the collection. So translation is very different process from amblyopia, and also translation is very much a seed for the collection. So they're very related. Um, yes. And yes, and there was a second part of your question. What was that?
Okay, so
Yeah, that was translation.
yeah, so
Mhm.
I was saying that if there's any poem or you have written or any story that you would like to share, so please feel free to share with us.
Nice. I'll open. I think I'll get maybe a poem from translation that also is in the collection, maybe if that
Sure,
works.
sure.
Okay, and I'll take just a minute to sort of open in here. I wonder. I will open. I'll just get the collection. Take a minute. Oh, I know. I'll just search for the poem.
No worries, take your time. No worries.
Yes. Ah, there you go. There you go. Ah, where is it? Oh no, seems like when you, oh, like the different, remember how I said that those, all the different versions, all the different versions come out. All right, no, that's not it. I'm sorry about that. Let me see. Galley. I'll open the galley. Internet. There you go. There you go. Got it. Nope. Sorry about that. I know. I'll just find it as an attachment. There you go. Yeah. Sorry about that. It's like the internet, you know?
No, no worries. Take your time. I'm enjoying the view of park. Meanwhile, you can search for poem.
There you go. It's nice and sunny. All right. I can open and the downloading. Almost there. Ah, finally. Okay. Ah, so there you go. All right. So I think I'll read line, which I think it's very, there you go. Line is very much, it brings a lot of the themes both in translation and on Motherland. Line. I inherited from my mother the knobbly joints and square ends of my fingers. From my father, I got the habit of biting my nails. The shortness, the frayed missing skin had never bothered me. But now I have a son, and he has begun to bite too. In America, I learned that one can snap a rubber band against my I can snap a rubber band against my wrist each time my hand reaches up toward the mouth. On the back of my hand, the rubber band disappears into the color of my skin. But when I turn and face the inner side, it is a clear division of my body. The first time I saw a cotton tree, I found it beautiful. The cotton so white in its brown cradle, so soft against the square tips of my fingers. I squeezed the dead flower around it and felt joy from hearing it crackle. As children, we had cups full of sugar cane. We chewed on it and spit out the bagasse. Toothless men ran the knobbly stalks through a machine. The juice trickled into our glasses, and the flat piece that came out on the other side was put through it again until everything was gone. The dry split stalk thrown into a pile, limp like blonde hair. When I first arrived in America, I didn't understand what people meant when they said with an American accent that they were Irish or Italian or French. Now that I understand, I asked my mother for a family tree. She said she had never thought of such things, and she wouldn't know much past her grandmother's first name. So what I have is my memory of the faces of my relatives and my own. When I first arrived in America, all I could see was beauty. The snow, fine like sugar, white like cotton. But now, the beauty, the land, the tired metaphors just make me sad. Before I left for America, I saw an individual in the mirror. But today, I see my father, my mother, my brothers, my son, and a man missing skin from tears on his back, and the man who did it. When I looked this morning, I tugged on my rubber band so hard that it broke. There you go. Thank you.
Oh wow, I really loved it. I mean, in one poem you touch so many things. Wow, I love it. It's amazing. So
Thank you.
Ananda, we would wrap the session now. So then after the recording part, and then we'll have a chit chat for a while, and then we'll conclude it. Okay, so I'll
Thank you so much.
my pleasure. So I'll conclude. So the recording stop now.